was supposed to be an exciting adventure. I'm Taylor, an off-road enthusiast, decided to embark on a solo camping trip into the forest. My SUV was equipped with everything I needed: food, water, a good sound system, and even a comfortable fold-out bed. My plan was simple: drive to a secluded spot in the forest, set up camp, and spend a few days enjoying nature. I was confident and thrilled at the prospect of exploring the unknown. The night I arrived was peaceful and serene. The moon shone through the treetops, creating a magical atmosphere. I lit a campfire, opened a bottle of wine, and snuggled up in my seat, watching the dancing flames. I felt incredibly relaxed, away from the hustle of the city. This is life, I thought, smiling to myself. However, as the night progressed, a sense of unease began to settle in. I couldn't pinpoint the exact cause, but something felt out of place. The wind whispered through the pines, producing strange sounds, and shadows danced at the corners of my vision. My instincts told me I was not alone. Horror stories set in the forest began to invade my thoughts. I tried to convince myself that I was being foolish. These are just scary forest tales, I thought. There's nothing here but trees and wildlife. But still, I couldn't shake a sense of apprehension. I decided it was best to prepare for the night. I put away the empty wine bottle and extinguished the campfire, making sure all the embers were out. I locked the SUV's doors and double-checked that the windows were closed. When I lay down, I pulled a blanket up to my chin and tried to fall asleep. The wind softly howled, as if whispering a warning. Legends of haunted forests lingered in my mind, but I ignored them, forcing my eyes to grow heavy. I was determined to enjoy my night in the forest, no matter how persistent my worries were. I managed to fall asleep, despite the restlessness I felt. However, my sleep was interrupted by a distant and unsettling sound. It was as if someone were singing, but the melody was odd and dissonant. My eyes snapped open, and my heart began to pound. The darkness inside the SUV seemed deeper, and I felt momentarily disoriented. "Must be the wind," I murmured, trying to calm myself. "Or maybe some strange animal." Yet, the more I listened, the more I realized it wasn't any animal I knew. The singing was almost human, but there was something wrong with it. It was as if the person were singing backward, or in some unknown language. A sense of fear coiled in my stomach. I was now fully awake, my body rigid with tension. My SUV suddenly felt small and vulnerable in the vastness of the forest. My eyes scanned the darkness beyond the windows, searching for any sign of movement. "This is ridiculous," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. "It's probably just some prankster hunter trying to scare people." But still, I couldn't shake the fear that was settling over me. Paranormal encounters in haunted forests haunted my imagination. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could discern the shapes of the trees and bushes surrounding me. The moon, hidden behind clouds, cast an eerie light on the landscape. Scary stories of forests echoed in my mind, and I wondered if there was any truth to them. My heart raced as I considered the possibility that I was not alone. "I just need to leave," I thought, feeling the sudden urge to escape the forest. But then, just as my heart was beginning to slow down, the singing stopped. The forest fell into a suffocating silence. I could feel the sweat trickling down my temple, and my throat was dry. I sat there, motionless, waiting, my heart pounding. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and even the wind had ceased. My SUV became a fortress, protecting me from the unknown. I felt like a trapped mouse waiting for a predator to appear. The minutes ticked by, and nothing happened. Slowly, I began to calm down, thinking that maybe my fear was unfounded. "You're letting your imagination run wild," I told myself. "There's nothing out there." Just then, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was as if someone were dragging their feet across the ground, approaching my vehicle. My heart leaped into my throat, and I shrunk back, clutching the knife tightly. The sound stopped, and then I heard a sigh, followed by a soft tap on the window. My entire body froze. I couldn't move or breathe. The figure at the window was obscure, a dark shape against the night. "Hey!" My voice trembled. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me. A wave of panic washed over me, and I found myself screaming something unintelligible. The figure retreated, and then I heard hurried footsteps fading away. I sat there, breathless, my heart hammering in my chest. My first instinct was to start the SUV and drive away as fast as I could. But then the reality of the situation hit me. I didn't know who or what that figure was, and blindly fleeing through the forest seemed like a terrible idea. My eyes turned to the window where the figure had appeared. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting light on the area. I could see marks on the ground where something had been dragged. A chill ran down my spine. The morning light bathed the forest, revealing a tranquil and serene landscape. The fog, like a soft veil, enveloped the trees, creating an almost magical atmosphere. I stepped out of my SUV, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension as I thought about the strange encounter from the night before. The enigmatic marks on the ground, left by something being dragged, were still there, waiting to be deciphered. My heart fluttered as I recalled the mysterious figure who had knocked on my window. I was determined to find out who or what had been there. I ventured into the forest, my eyes alert for any clues. The fog, while adding an ethereal quality to the scene, also made it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. The marks on the ground seemed to be the only evidence that something unusual had occurred here. I followed the trail, my eyes scanning for any sign of disturbance in the forest. As I ventured deeper into the misty setting, my heart raced with the expectation of finding answers. However, the more I searched, the more the forest seemed to guard its secrets. The marks eventually disappeared, leading nowhere. I stopped, my heart sinking a little. I looked around, my eyes searching for anything out of the ordinary, but the forest appeared untouched, as if nothing unusual had taken place here. My encounter from the previous night seemed even more mysterious in the light of day. Who was that man? What was he doing in the forest, and why had he knocked on my window? My head was filled with unanswered questions. I decided it was time to leave. I returned to the SUV, my pace a little quicker than before. I started the engine and drove away, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. As I drove back to civilization, my thoughts wandered. Who was that mysterious man? What did he want, and why had he appeared at my window that night? The forest, with its legends and mysteries, had left me with more questions than answers. The sense of uncertainty persisted, and I found myself longing for answers that might never come. When I was a teenager, at the age of 16, my best friend Brandon and I had a ritual. Several times every summer, our families would go camping together at a state park. And every night, after the sun set and the forest was enveloped in shadows, the two of us would venture out to explore. We called it our ritual. It was an adventure, an escape from the monotony of everyday life. We boasted about our courage, laughing nervously as we ventured deeper into the darkness. We always brought flashlights, but often we'd dare each other to navigate with them off, relying only on the moon and stars for light. "Are you ready for tonight?" Brandon asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. We were sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and listening to our parents' ghost stories. I smiled, feeling a mix of thrill and nervousness. "Of course, let's go." We sneaked past the tents, making sure everyone was asleep. The moon shone through the treetops, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor. We giggled, our whispers echoing in the night. "I think we're about 800 meters from the nearest campsite," Brandon commented as we walked along a familiar path. I nodded, my senses alert for any sound or movement. The forest felt different at night, more eerie and full of possibilities. We walked in silence, our steps soft on the leafy ground. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Our flashlights were on, but we kept them low, casting beams of light on the ground in front of us. "Have you ever heard about the legends of this forest?" Brandon asked suddenly, his voice low and hesitant. My heart skipped a beat. I loved horror stories, but I was also afraid of the unknown. "No," I murmured. "Why?" "Well, they say strange things happen here," he continued, his eyes gleaming with a mischievous glint. "Real-life horror stories. about paranormal encounters in forests. I laughed nervously, trying to hide my growing unease. Are you trying to scare me? Brandon smiled, but his eyes remained serious. I've heard some pretty scary forest stories. People going missing, shadows moving in the trees, whispers carried by the wind. Just then a sound made us stop. A soft whisper, like a gentle wind passing through the trees. We both fell silent, our hearts racing. Did you hear that? Brandon whispered, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded, my eyes scanning the darkness. Came again, a little closer. We both turned, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. And then we saw something that made our hearts freeze. There, on the ground, crawling towards us, was a figure. Our eyes widened in surprise and fear. The figure was whispering, the words unintelligible, just random sounds. We both stood frozen, our flashlights trembling in our hands. Who's there? Brandon managed to ask, his voice shaking. The figure stopped and lifted its head. In the flashlight beam, we saw the face of a woman, her eyes vague and confused. Her hair was tangled, and her clothes were torn and dirty. She looked like she had stepped out of a horror story. I am looking, she whispered, her voice weak and hoarse, looking for my campsite. We both stood mute for a moment, our eyes wide with surprise. Then I stepped forward, extending my hand. Are you okay? I asked, my voice strangely calm. Did you get lost? The woman seemed to focus on us for the first time, and her eyes widened in surprise. My campsite, she repeated, her voice a little stronger. I got lost. Without a word, we began to guide her back along the path. Our steps were quick, driven by a desire to escape the forest and our own fears. Thank you, she whispered, her voice sounding grateful. I think I got lost trying to find a bathroom. We helped her back to her campsite, where her friends greeted her with relief and surprise. They hadn't realized she was missing, and we wondered what could have happened if we hadn't found her. That night, which had started as an adventure, now felt like a distant dream. Sitting by the campfire, holding a cup of hot chocolate, I couldn't get the woman out of my head. Her sudden appearance in the forest, her unintelligible whispers, it all felt like part of a mysterious forest tale. Do you think she was okay? I asked Brandon, my eyes wandering into the darkness beyond the firelight. I mean, she seemed a bit out of it. He sighed, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I don't know, maybe she was just disoriented, lost in the forest. My thoughts wandered back to the horror stories of the forest I had heard over the years. Legends of haunted forests, supernatural encounters. Could there be any truth to them? Do you think there's anything in this forest? I asked, my voice low and hesitant. Anything? Unexplainable? Brandon smiled, but his eyes remained serious. Who can say? He replied, his voice carrying a tone of mystery. The forest is an ancient place, full of secrets and stories. Who knows what might be lurking in the shadows? My heart raced with the idea. Do you think we saw her because we were out there, wandering in the night? I asked, my voice carrying a tone of fear. What would have happened if we hadn't found her? Perhaps we'll never know. But one thing is certain, the forest keeps its secrets, and we as humans fear the unknown. That night, with its stories and mysterious encounters, left a lasting impression. I found myself pondering the secrets hidden in the depths of the forest, my mind weaving its own tales of the unknown. The moon hung high in the sky as I, Luna, and my sister-in-law, Raven, ventured into the depths of the North Umpqua Trail in Oregon. The summer night enveloped the forest in a gentle warmth, and the air was scented with the fresh fragrance of pine trees. We packed supplies, including flashlights and a map, anticipating an exciting adventure. Have you ever come across the scary stories associated with this forest, Luna? Raven asked, her tone laden with intrigue as her eyes scanned the surrounding landscape. They say spirits roam these trails, leaving a trail of chills and mysteries. I laughed, the idea of forest horror stories seeming a bit far-fetched. Oh, Raven, you and your urban legends. I wouldn't buy into those forest horror tales for a million years. They're just made-up stories to entertain campers on nights like this." Raven smiled, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint in the faint moonlight. "Maybe you're right, Luna. But there's something irresistibly fascinating about those paranormal forest encounters, don't you think? The idea that nature holds secrets that defy our understanding is intriguing." Our footsteps echoed along the trails, blending with the nocturnal sounds of the forest. The darkness deepened, enveloping us in its mysterious embrace as we ventured further away from the safety of our campsite. Suddenly, Raven stopped abruptly, causing me to almost bump into her. "Wait," she whispered, her voice urgent. "I saw something. Over there, in the shadows." She pointed to a spot in the darkness where the trees seemed to dance with the breeze. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm night. "Let's keep walking," I insisted, my heart quickening. "It's probably just an animal or an illusion caused by the darkness. No need to dawdle." We quickened our pace, leaving behind the dancing shadows and the discomfort they evoked. The trail wound deeper into the forest, and as we walked, the moon cast ethereal lights through the treetops, creating intricate patterns on the forest floor. "Have you ever thought about how the forest feels different at night, Luna?" Raven commented, her voice echoing softly in the stillness. "It's as if we're in a whole new world, unknown and full of possibilities." I nodded, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Yes, it's as if the forest takes on a new personality when the sun sets. The sounds are different. The shadows seem longer and more menacing, and even the air feels laden with mystery." As we walked, a strange sound, one that didn't belong in the surroundings, began to infiltrate the night. It was like a distant whisper, laden with sadness and anguish. It seemed to come from all around, echoing through the trees like a gentle wind. Raven stopped once again, her expression concerned. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded my head, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yes, it sounds sad, like a lament." We cautiously moved towards the sound, guided by a morbid curiosity. The trail opened up into a small clearing, and it was there that we discovered the source of the sorrowful sound. In the middle of the clearing sat a hooded figure on a large rock. They were turned away from us, their shoulders shaking as they let out soft moans. As we approached, the figure straightened, slowly turning to reveal a pale face and red, tear-filled eyes. My heart hammered in my chest at the sight of the hooded figure sitting on the rock, their eyes fixed on us. I exchanged a glance with Raven, seeing the mirror of my own fear in her eyes. Without a word, we silently turned and began to retreat, our hands finding and squeezing each other tightly. "Let's go," I whispered, pulling her gently back. Our steps turned into a desperate run as we fled the clearing. The figure remained still, a dark statue under the moonlight, but I felt its eyes on the back of my neck, piercing my spine. The trail seemed endless, the trees blurring past us as we ran as fast as we could. The sound of our footsteps echoed through the forest, blending with the sound of our pounding hearts. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind us, followed by the sound of quick footsteps. I looked over my shoulder and saw with horror that the hooded figure was chasing us, its eyes shining with determination in the darkness. "She's coming after us," I cried out, pulling Raven into an abrupt detour off the trail. We ran through the trees, dodging low branches and stepping on dry leaves, our feet making little noise compared to the determined steps behind us. The moon provided little light, making it difficult to navigate the rugged terrain, but fear propelled us forward. Raven stumbled and I caught her, my heart in my throat. We couldn't stop, not now. The figure was too close, its hood floating like a cape behind her. I spotted a creek and pulled Raven into the shadows. The water was icy, but it provided cover. We crouched, breathless, watching the figure run past, its bones tinkling sinisterly as it moved away. After our terrifying escape, Raven and I returned home, our hearts still racing from the chase. We barely slept that night, haunted by images of the hooded figure and its unsettling bones. The next morning, we made the decision to report the incident to the authorities. We described our experience to the local sheriff, who assured us he would investigate the area and try to find some clues about the hooded figure's identity. The days dragged on without a word from the sheriff. Anxiety grew within me, a mix of curiosity and fear about what we might have encountered in that forest. Finally, a few days later, the sheriff showed up at my door. His face was somber, and he seemed reluctant to share his findings. "What did you find?" I asked, my heart pounding. Was there any truth to the tale of the hooded figure? The sheriff hesitated, his eyes wandering the floor. "Look, Luna, I won't lie to you. There was something unusual about that area of the forest." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "We found evidence of disturbing activities, but I can't go into details." "Who was that woman?" I pressed, determined to get answers. Why was she chasing us? The sheriff lifted his eyes, his gaze serious. "I can't reveal her identity, but I can tell you that you and Raven were in grave danger that night. The area has been the site of some strange incidents, and your presence there may have attracted the attention of something undesirable." My mouth went dry as his words sank in. "Are you saying we were in actual danger? Or what was after us?" The sheriff ran his hand over his face, a tired gesture. "Luna, all I can say is that sometimes there are things in the darkness that are best left unanswered. Some truths are too disturbing to be revealed." And with that, he left, leaving me with more questions than answers. In the years that followed, that night haunted my dreams. I never ventured onto the North Umpqua Trail again, and when I heard the area had been consumed by a wildfire, a chill ran down my spine. Perhaps the fire had purged the forest of its dark secrets, or perhaps it had unleashed something far more sinister. To some, the story may be just an urban legend, another one of the many forest horror stories, but to me, it's a constant reminder that there are things in the shadows that defy our comprehension, and that sometimes it's best to leave some mysteries unsolved.
If you enjoyed the video you just watched, you won't want to miss this next one. Click now and I'll see you there.